It all started when the power went out late one night, leaving me alone with someone I shouldn't even have been thinking about. I'm Olivia, the new assistant curator at Briarwood Art Gallery. I'd spent weeks learning the ropes, memorizing paintings, guiding tours, and diligently avoiding James, the gallery director. He had a reputation around the office, authoritative yet charming, a mysterious man whose penetrating gaze seemed to see right through every pretension. I'd done my best to remain invisible, blending into the background, quietly efficient and professional. But fate had other plans. The gallery had just closed, and I stayed late cataloging a newly arrived collection. As I moved between dimly lit rooms, the storm outside grew fierce, thunder rumbling so loud it rattled the walls. Suddenly, darkness engulfed everything. A surge of panic shot through my veins. I wasn't fond of the dark, especially alone in this sprawling space filled with shadows and echoes. My phone illuminated nothing but a feeble circle ahead as I nervously made my way towards the main hall. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I felt eyes on me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely masking the anxiety beneath. "It's just me," came a familiar low voice from the shadows. Dylan, the gallery director, my charismatic, enigmatic boss. He stepped into the pale glow of my phone's flashlight, a faint smirk on his lips as lightning momentarily lit up his sharp features. My pulse quickened. "Oh," I said, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "I didn't think anyone else was here." He approached slowly, his tall frame emerging from the darkness. The subtle scent of his cologne teased my senses, stirring feelings I had worked tirelessly to suppress. Dylan always maintained a careful, professional distance, but tonight, with no prying eyes around, something felt different. "The storm knocked out the power," he murmured softly, standing closer than necessary. I could feel the warmth radiating off him, our proximity electrifying the air between us. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," I swallowed, heart hammering. "I guess we are." A flash of lightning briefly illuminated his features, revealing an intensity in his eyes that sent a thrill of anticipation down my spine. I quickly looked away, cheeks flushed, embarrassed by how easily I could unravel in his presence. "You seem nervous, Olivia," he said gently, an amused undertone coloring his voice. "Afraid of the dark?" "Maybe a little," I admitted, embarrassed, but oddly relieved to confess my vulnerability to him. He reached out, fingers brushing lightly against mine, sending sparks dancing across my skin. "Then it's lucky I'm here to keep you company." My breath caught as our eyes met again. The silence stretched between us, loaded with unspoken tension and dangerous possibility. Dylan was my boss, off limits by every professional standard. Yet, standing this close, alone in the silent gallery, rules suddenly felt irrelevant. A distant crash of thunder startled me, instinctively drawing me closer. His hand lightly touched my elbow, steadying me. "Careful," he whispered, voice warm and reassuring, but his lingering touch suggested something else entirely. I knew this was dangerous territory. Every logical part of me screamed to step back, to create distance, to respect boundaries. But in this forbidden moment, logic and reason no longer held sway. As I lifted my gaze to his, I caught something unexpected. A flicker of hesitation, uncertainty even, in his usually composed expression. That glimpse of vulnerability was enough to unravel my remaining defenses. Just as I was about to speak, the emergency lights flickered dimly to life, casting us both in soft red illumination. And that's when I saw something else. A figure reflected in the polished glass of a nearby painting. We weren't alone after all. If you want to know what happened next, you might want to stick around, and maybe hit that subscribe button for me. The reflection vanished in an instant, leaving me wondering if I'd imagined it, or if someone else had indeed witnessed that charged moment between Dylan and me. My heart pounded erratically as Dylan took a step back, clearing his throat as if suddenly aware of how close we had gotten. "Looks like the backup generator kicked in," he said, forcing casualness back into his tone. "I should probably check the circuit breakers." I nodded, still distracted by the phantom reflection in the glass. Who was there? And how long had they been watching us? As Dylan disappeared down the corridor, I wandered cautiously toward the spot where the figure had appeared. My pulse quickened as I approached the painting, inspecting the faint smudges left on the glass. Someone had been standing here recently. Unease tightened my chest, and paranoia crept into my thoughts. Had someone seen our brief moment of intimacy? Would they spread gossip around the gallery, tarnishing my reputation before my career even began? Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind me. I turned quickly, breath hitching, but relaxed slightly when I saw it was only Jenna, the senior curator known for her cunning smile and razor-sharp intuition. Her bright eyes scanned my face closely, looking for clues I desperately tried to conceal. "Working late with Dylan?" she teased, her playful tone edged with something sharper. "Careful, Olivia. He's charming, but dangerous." "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning innocence, though her words had already planted a seed of doubt. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let's just say you're not the first assistant he's kept late after hours." My stomach dropped at her implication, jealousy briefly mixing with an irrational surge of disappointment. Of course I wasn't special. This was probably just a game. To him, a thrilling distraction. But as I glanced back toward where Dylan had disappeared, a defiant curiosity burned beneath my worry. Was Dylan genuinely interested? Or was this just another conquest to him? The following days only heightened the tension. Dylan seemed distant, yet watchful, his eyes occasionally catching mine in fleeting, unreadable exchanges. The careful distance between us felt even more maddening than our moment of closeness. Yet, I knew the stakes. Crossing that invisible boundary risked everything I'd worked so hard for. Then, late Friday evening, Dylan called me into his office after the rest of the staff had left. My pulse quickened, uncertainty gnawing at me as I stepped inside. He stood by his desk, his gaze serious and intense. "We need to talk about the other night," he began carefully, closing the door behind us. The sound felt final, sealing us in together, away from prying ears and judgmental glances. "I understand if you feel uncomfortable," he continued slowly, choosing each word with deliberate care. "What happened? Or almost happened? It shouldn't have." I felt a sharp pang of disappointment. "I see," I said softly, forcing calmness I didn't feel. Was this rejection or regret? "But," he paused, eyes locking firmly on mine. "I can't deny how much I've thought about it." His admission sent a thrill racing through me, reigniting the sparks I desperately tried to extinguish. His gaze softened, revealing a rare sincerity that weakened my resolve. Before I could reply, my phone vibrated insistently, breaking the charged silence. The screen flashed urgently. A single anonymous message appeared, chilling me to my core. "I saw you both. How far will you go to keep your secret?" My pulse raced as I looked up at Dylan, torn between panic and desire. Someone knew. Someone was watching, and now our forbidden moment had real, dangerous consequences. His eyes met mine, silently asking a question neither of us dared voice out loud. Could we trust each other to handle this? Or would suspicion tear us apart? "I think someone knows," I whispered, showing him the message, watching his jaw tighten as he read it. A shadow crossed his features, his mask of calm cracking ever so slightly. "Who?" he murmured darkly, eyes searching mine as if the answer lay within me. "And what do they want?" As dread and desire mingled in my heart, I realized our secret had taken on a dangerous life of its own, one we might no longer control. If you're eager to hear how deep this secret goes, stay close, and don't forget to subscribe. The Anonymous. Text haunted me for days. Every glance from a coworker seemed loaded with suspicion. Every hushed whisper felt like an accusation. Dylan tried to remain outwardly calm, but I saw the strain behind his eyes, the silent worry eating away at him. Whoever had sent that message hadn't contacted us again, but their silence was even more terrifying. It was as if they were biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment. My nerves were stretched to the breaking point when Dylan announced we'd be hosting a private evening preview event for important gallery patrons. It meant another late night alone in his presence, but this time surrounded by high-profile eyes that would scrutinize every interaction. As the gallery buzzed with wealthy art collectors, I forced myself to remain composed, greeting patrons and mingling gracefully, though my attention constantly drifted towards Dylan across the room. Our eyes met briefly, his gaze lingering a beat too long before he looked away. That tiny hesitation ignited something dangerous within me. Despite the risk, I wanted to feel that closeness again, to know if what we shared was real or just a fleeting illusion. A sharp laugh broke through my thoughts, pulling my attention towards Jenna, who stood sipping champagne, chatting animatedly with someone unfamiliar, a well-dressed man I'd never seen before. Jenna glanced at me slyly, eyes sparkling with subtle mischief, then whispered something to him. The stranger turned slowly, and his piercing gaze found me immediately, a knowing smirk playing across his lips. Unease churned in my stomach. Was this our anonymous observer? Before I could react, Dylan approached, his usual composure briefly slipping as he whispered urgently into my ear. "Be careful around Jenna and her friend. They seem unusually interested in us tonight." "Who is he?" I asked softly, feeling Dylan's closeness pull at my senses again, even as alarm bells rang louder in my mind. "Alec Harrington," Dylan answered, his voice taut. "An art investor, and Jenna's ex." I swallowed hard, understanding immediately. This wasn't just a workplace flirtation turned sour. It was a tangled web, complicated by jealousy, suspicion, and ambition. As the evening wore on, I felt watched from every angle. I tried to keep my interactions professional, but Dylan's closeness was intoxicatingly distracting. His fingertips brushed my wrist casually as he passed me a champagne flute, his voice soft and urgent. "Meet me in my office in 10 minutes. We need to talk without eyes on us." When the opportunity finally came, I slipped away unnoticed, heart racing as I walked swiftly down the dim hallway toward Dylan's office. But before I could open the door, Jenna's voice stopped me cold. "Do you really think you're special, Olivia?" she taunted softly, emerging from the shadows. Her eyes glittered with barely restrained hostility. "You're just his latest mistake, and trust me, there have been many." "What do you want, Jenna?" I shot back, summoning courage despite the tremble in my voice. She stepped closer, lips curled in a cruel smile. "I want you gone. Resign, or I'll tell everyone about your little after-hours rendezvous." "You have no proof," I countered, voice shaking. Her smile widened dangerously as she held up her phone, screen glowing ominously. "You really think so?" My stomach sank as I saw a photo on her screen. Captured that night in the gallery, Dylan and I unmistakably close, shadows betraying our intimacy. "Stay away from Dylan," she warned coldly, voice barely above a whisper, "or everyone finds out." She vanished as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving me trembling, my world spinning dangerously off balance. Desperation and anger surged through me. I couldn't let Jenna control my future, but could I risk everything to defy her? Before I could decide, Dylan reappeared, his voice tight with urgency. "Olivia, we need to talk privately. Now." My heart hammered as he led me into his office, locking the door behind us, cutting off the outside world. The tension between us burned brighter, fiercer, tinged now with a palpable fear of discovery. His eyes met mine, dark with intensity, desperation, and something more forbidden. "Tell me what Jenna said," he demanded softly, his voice taut with barely controlled emotion. My breath caught. The weight of the ultimatum pressed heavy upon me, forcing a choice I wasn't prepared to make. Should I tell him about Jenna's threat and the photo? Or keep silent and protect us both? But before I could decide, there was a sharp knock at the office door, loud and insistent. "Dylan, Olivia, I know you're in there," came a voice from the other side, authoritative, cold, and unmistakably familiar. My heart froze. It wasn't Jenna. It was far worse. We'd finally been caught. The knocking grew louder, sharper, cutting through the fragile silence like glass shattering. Dylan exchanged a look with me, a hint of panic flashing through his eyes before he swiftly masked it behind his usual calm. I stood frozen, my breath caught painfully in my chest, terrified of what waited just beyond that door. "Open up, Dylan," the voice demanded again, cold and unwavering. It was Alec. I recognized that cruel amusement hidden beneath his composed exterior. "We need to have a little chat." Dylan squared his shoulders, his jaw set in determination as he opened the door, revealing Alec standing confidently in the dim hallway, eyes glittering with malice. "Come in, Alec," Dylan said tightly, stepping aside. "Let's hear what you have to say." Alec stepped inside, eyes flicking between us knowingly. His gaze settled on me with unsettling intensity. "So, Olivia," he began smoothly, a sardonic smirk playing across his lips. "How long exactly did you think you could keep this little secret?" I felt exposed, humiliation washing over me like ice-cold water. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. My voice was trapped beneath a storm of fear, embarrassment, and defiance. "What do you want, Alec?" Dylan cut in sharply, stepping protectively between us, his presence radiating strength I desperately needed. "You've made your point." Alec laughed bitterly, folding his arms. "No, you don't understand yet. Jenna and I have an arrangement. We look out for each other. You've disrupted that balance. Now, if you want your precious reputations intact, you're both going to resign immediately." My heart dropped to the floor, the enormity of his demand crushing me. Dylan stood frozen, anger warring with shock in his expression. "You can't be serious," he managed through clenched teeth. "Over a single misunderstanding." "Oh, I'm completely serious," Alec snapped, suddenly intense, his mask dropping away to reveal simmering resentment beneath. "Either you both disappear quietly, or these photos go public. It's your choice." Held up his phone again, the evidence glaringly clear. Dylan looked at me, desperation etched deeply in his features. My stomach twisted painfully. This wasn't fair. We hadn't done anything to deserve ruin. But maybe Jenna had been right. Maybe I was just another naive victim caught in Dylan's web. As if sensing my thoughts, Dylan spoke urgently, stepping closer to me. "Olivia, whatever happens next, I won't let them hurt you." "How noble," Alec mocked, his voice dripping venom. "But your promises won't save her career." At that moment, something ignited within me, a fierce defiance I'd never known existed. I refused to be someone's pawn. I refused to let fear control me. Summoning strength I didn't know I had, I stepped forward boldly. "Do your worst, Alec," I challenged, voice steady despite trembling hands. "If you think threats will silence me, you're wrong. I'll walk out of here right now, and you can tell whoever you want. But I promise, the truth will come out. Your secret, Jenna's games, everything." Alec's smirk faltered, uncertainty briefly flickering in his eyes. Dylan stepped closer, supportively, protectively. "You're playing a dangerous game," Alec warned, his facade cracking. "Maybe," Dylan countered firmly, voice strong and protective. "But at least we're not playing alone." Alec glared hatefully, clearly rattled. He hesitated, then stormed out of the office, leaving us shaken but still standing. In the quiet aftermath, Dylan looked at me, eyes filled with admiration, and something deeper, softer. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered gratefully. "I had to," I whispered back, vulnerability flooding my voice. "I couldn't let him destroy you." In that breathless moment, Dylan stepped closer, hand reaching gently to cup my cheek. The tension that had built between us erupted into something deeper, more genuine than either of us anticipated. His lips found mine, soft and searching, the forbidden thrill replaced by raw, honest emotion. When we finally pulled away, breathless, his gaze softened into something tender, sincere. "Whatever happens next, Olivia," he promised quietly, "we face it together." I nodded silently, heart swelling with newfound courage and hope. Maybe we'd survive this scandal, or maybe the consequences would catch us tomorrow. But tonight, in this fragile sanctuary we'd created, none of that mattered. The truth was finally out in the open, freeing us both from secrets and fear. But as we stood there, comforted by each other's presence, one lingering thought still haunted me, refusing to fade away completely. Was it really over? Thanks for listening to my confession. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and leave a like. And tell me honestly, would you risk it all for a secret romance?